we just had the first major public playtest and look at what Diablo IV will bring on in its June 6th launch, and while it was a mixed experience, at least for me and multiple other people, to me it was definitely an overall positive one. Now, of the issues that were present, and there definitely were a few, most should be able to be ironed out by the launch date, let alone the next beta, which will be this coming weekend. If not for that, if there are any deeper issues lurking behind, you're probably looking at a day one patch or a close to day one patch. So with that being said, let's dive into my experiences with the Diablo IV Early Access Beta. Now this is the beta, so the customization and options that we have present might not be reflective of what is released in the final product, though it does seem, at least currently, that is what you'd expect to come in and do expect in a PC game anymore, including NVIDIA DLSS, which is always a great inclusion to help provide performance or visual boosts to the game for those both on older and newer hardware. Outside of the traditional video and sound options and NVIDIA DLSS, we do have a slew of various accessibility options available. Text-to-speech, so any sort of text in the game will be spoken out by a text reader within the game, and you do also have a voice chat to text from your party members. So if you are using the voice chat functionality in a game, you can have that translated to text within the game for you. There are some also options here for those who are colorblind, where you will be able to adjust the intensity of the adjustment for each of the three major types of colorblindedness. There are also some social options available where you can turn off cross-network play or cross-network communication if you don't want to deal with that. But for a game like Diablo, where there's not much of an advantage, if any at all, especially in like PvP zones, and if this even does work for PvP zones, it doesn't really seem like it's an important option to have, but it is one there nonetheless for you. The performance of the beta, though, oh boy, that performance. I was victim to some intense stuttering and rubber banding at times, and this is easily an argument against it being an online title. And I do really hope that these server stability issues have been hammered out. Some of them have been with an early patch, but we'll definitely see more coming in the next. When encountering other players in the main city hub for the Fractured Peaks zone, Dash, the game would rubber band at times, your character would teleport back to where they previously were, or just wouldn't move at all. The game would just overall lag and bog down with these multiple players in these instances as well. This issue wasn't only in areas popular with other players, though. In my own dungeon instances, I would face these issues as well from the server side. As the weekend went on, performance did improve substantially, but the issues were still there and prevalent. Server disconnects were also a major issue at the beginning of the beta, especially if you were not a fan of sitting in 2-hour queues. But those issues did really fall off towards the end, as Blizzard did work on server stability and server availability for people coming in. However, this coming weekend for the open beta, where everybody can just download and try it, we'll definitely see how those fixes went for Blizzard, or if they will rear their ugly heads once again. So this open beta will probably be closer to the experience players will have when the game launches in full, though hopefully Blizzard has learned a thing or two about launching a game this time around. But 25 years of Blizzard launches and my personal experience with that really have led me to doubt that they have it quite figured out. Now, from a visual and audio standpoint, Diablo IV looks and sounds great. Sanctuary is a dark and dreary world, once again on the verge of an apocalypse. The true war between the heavens and hell is kicking off into full effect for the fourth time that we get to experience it. Fifth, if you do want to include Diablo Immortal as an actual game. Visually, we do have a return to the more grounded, dark, and gritty reality of the first two titles, Diablo and Diablo 2. Diablo 3 did have a more cartoony look, which was a point of contention for fans of the series, and 4 has reverted back to that more based and realistic approach to the visuals. Well, as close to you can in a world that is the sanctuary from the war between angels and demons, at least. The overworld is dark and dreary, from the low swamplands and trudging through the twisted forests and bogs to the barren and craggy mountains covered in snow, hiking through the deep snow leaving a trail. It's a great little detail that they do have. The world is richly detailed and visually stunning to behold. The overworld is detailed how you expect it to be for the various biomes you'd be trekking through. Dungeons are greatly detailed and the ambience is great in those, at least the first few times you do get to run through them. You can tell the history of each dungeon by pushing through to its boss, and the environmental storytelling present is a great change, and that is really thanks to a lack of the complete procedural generation we do see in the previous titles, though that does pose another issue entirely that I'll get to at a later point. Character designs are unique for the available classes. NPCs are detailed enough, with the important characters do definitely stand out and are visually unique, definitely have, sort of a unique look to them that you see with most important characters in every scene. The various armors for each classes and how they wear them, what they look like, are greatly detailed, and you have a very good variance in what is available, at least in the first area that you go through, as style is always important. These skills all look great as well when used, with the sorcerer taking the cake here because, well, that magic will just always look more impressive than swinging around a sword, though the Fountains of Blood the Barbarian can still is definitely impressive in itself. Sound-wise, the environments are filled with ambient noise that makes sense to the locales and make the areas feel alive, or, extra undead in the case of the crypts, albeit either way, filled and not empty. Enemies have their own unique sounds for their type of actions and skills as well. The player skills all do have great sound design as well, with the sorcerer once again taking the lead here for their skills. The music in Diablo IV is fantastic, and that's what you kind of expect from Blizzard in these titles anymore. They've always nailed sound design, especially on the music side with their games for Diablo, but the voice work that they put in, man, is that fantastic. The characters you do encounter repeatedly, the ones who will, kind of fill you in along the act's main story beats, are all voiced to perfection. They nailed the actors and actresses that they chose to voice the main cast in your encounters. Now, I only played as a male character for the 3 classes we had available, and to me, they all sounded kind of the same. There wasn't a ton of difference here, aside from saying various things when using a skill, such as not having enough rage for an action, being out of mana, or not having enough energy on the rogue. They all sounded pretty samey. I'm not going to try out a female character until the next beta, the open beta, when I have the Necromancer and Druid available. So I'll check it out when those are available. Overall, though, the visuals and sound design of Diablo IV is just absolutely fantastic. I didn't have a single moment where I thought that something seemed lackluster visually or just sounded disappointing. With Diablo IV, Blizzard has opted for an overall huge change to the design of the game. Gone is the complete procedural generation of the game's past. The overworld is now a shared MMO-like experience for all the players logged in and on the server, though some are going to be instanced with others, while others with, in other instances of the game, much like something perhaps with Lost Ark, or how you'd have shards in WoW in certain areas just to kind of cut down on the overall amount of people, though if you party up with someone, you will be in the same instance. This is a change of design taken from something such as Lost Ark, where you do have that shared overworld and then those dungeons you can go into or other experiences. You can run across other players in this open world, fight mobs with them, complete random public events with them, and of course, fight large world bosses when those spawn and are available. Most of the time, you'll just run across them and that will be that, aside from maybe completing a public event with them. So for this, the world is no longer really procedural because you're all going to be sharing that same massive area, which is a double-edged sword because it does make it easy to run through an area, which I do overall like this change, though that does take out a little bit of the replayability for the future. Multiple little towns exist, which will be a hub for crafting and teleport points to move through the world a bit faster, and some of these are hidden in locations called strongholds. Now, strongholds are a new mechanic. They're kind of like an open world dungeon that is just for yourself and your party, and these will require you to clear them to gain access to the town, and a waypoint within it as well, such as one where I had to clear out a demon summoning and worshipping ritual, or one where I had to eradicate it and save it from a, what do they call the race? The Goatmen, where the Goatmen were performing a ritual in the middle, keeping everyone frozen and overran and killed. Doing this will unlock this as another little town you'll be able to use a waypoint to port to faster, have a crafting area, a healer, just a basic store, as well as a unique dungeon that's only available once you clear it. Now, this does help with your reputation system, which is present in the game, much like you'd have in, say, World of Warcraft, where raising your reputation unlocks multiple things. Some things are for your entire account, such as extra skill points, so if you complete the game and unlock all of these reputation gains with one character, those skill points will be available immediately when you create a new character. And some things, such as gold or some crafting materials and stuff like that, will be per character on a character-by-character basis. Now, there are a lot of little dungeons in the game as well. There are a ton of them, and completing them will provide specific awards, such as things called aspects, which you can imbue on different weapons for each of the classes to provide some extra ability skills or increased damage with a certain attack type or something like that. Now, these dungeons do have some procedural generation to them. The layout will be slightly different each time you run through it, but it's not nearly to the extent that we did see in prior Diablo titles, which does kind of lower the replayability a little bit, though in most cases you just ran through those anyways and could tell which kind of direction you were going and seeing if you're going to the right direction or not. The bosses in some of those dungeons are rather unique and require a little more thought into defeating them, kind of more like a typical MMO boss where their abilities and mechanics are displayed and you have to dodge them or complete some other things as well. Now, the most annoying thing I found about these dungeons is that they all required a really simple, annoying puzzle door to proceed. That be it collecting something called a bloodstone to place in a pot to open the door, requiring 2 specific cubes to place on pedestals to unlock a lock on a sarcophagus to fight the boss. Now, if this was something to maybe increase the loot or the difficulty of the boss to increase the loot, I can see that being okay, but other than that, it just really seems like it's a way to extend the dungeons and not really a great or fun manner. Now, these could just be the only things that they put in the beta and are hiding some other sort of mechanics for the full launch, but I'm not too sure about that. And without the procedural generation that we had in past titles, going through these dungeons over and over and over again might get really repetitive, though we don't have too much word on what the end game's actually going to be for Diablo 4, so it might not, at all be an issue when that time comes. Now, with the overworld being player and player, where just running across other players, that's not the same for the dungeons. The dungeons are completely instanced to you and your party. So running through the open world into a dungeon and you encounter another player outside of that dungeon, if they are not in your party, they will be put into their own. So that is a good little thing as well. There are also going to be world bosses available, where multiple players will come together in the overworld and to fight a very difficult foe. These are near raid MMO boss encounters in complexity and difficulty, at least, currently. And they do scale with the players taking place, though they do have a minimum level as well. And those will be broadcast on the world map, at least the one that was available in the Fractured Peaks was. Overall, a majority of the changes they made, I think, were great changes. Running around Sanctuary and passing another player does make it seem a little less lonely and more lived in, especially, going about killing demons and running across someone else who's just going to help you fight off that pack of goatmen or skeletons. This is a new MMO-like approach Blizzard has decided to take, and is a great change with the public events and world bosses available. Though those locked doors in the dungeons are really samey and boring to complete over and over, and hopefully, like I said, there'll be a larger variety in the future at release. Now, we did get 3 different classes available for this early access to the beta. We had a Sorcerer, Barbarian, and Rogue. Each class definitely felt unique. Barbarians will use various weapons at their disposal for different attacks, in some cases using whichever is better for the same class, or choosing via the armory, focusing on dual-wielding one-handed weapons for incredibly fast attacking and some other bonuses, slow and powerful bludgeoning weapons for upfront damage and stuns, or slashing weapons focusing on applying bleeds to groups of enemies or a single enemy, and then forcing all that damage at one time in an AoE as well in some cases, or even a combination of all 3 and switching weapons on the fly. Next, you have your rogue, focusing on small one-handed weapons such as daggers, short swords, and then you have your ranged weapons such as crossbows and bows. They can focus either into sort of an all-melee build, an all-marksman build, or kind of a combination of both. They do have, I think, the best mobility. They did have a dash that has 2 charges. That's pretty quick recharge. That is over the normal one evade that each class has every 6 seconds, which is a fantastic approach, by the way. I think that is a fantastic choice to do. And then finally, we do have our sorcerer, wielder of the arcane arts, dealing in shock, frost, and fire type damages. You have your slowing and freezing enemies with frost, stunning and splitting attacks with shock and just large AoE areas, and then applying burn and explosions AoEs with the fire types. Now, all 3 classes can switch between spell types or weapon types and skill types on the go. The only real limitation is the ability slots present to be used. So, if you're kind of forced to push and focus on a few abilities rather than a large variety, and just kind of force out those and come up with a really unique and centralized build. And this is fine, I do think, if the available classes are seemingly balanced at all. Now, I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was just me. I don't know if I just didn't understand how to build a rogue or barbarian properly, and I did try. I got them both to 25, and I unlocked all the extra skill points and everything. Mostly legendaries, extra skill points from those legendaries. I just couldn't figure them all out through numerous respecs and experiments with the available classes. This sorcerer was by far, and it's not even close, the most powerful and safest class to play in the beta, and that's not even including if you took the glass cannon perk, which increased your damage by 6% per point, and then increased the damage you took by 3%. Even with that, it was still the safest and most powerful class to do. It would just erase large packs of enemies or erase bosses with no real need to specialize in anything outside of shock and hydra and ice armor. Now, I initially started off playing the beta as a barbarian. I wanted to swing around a big old hammer, fight with a 2-handed sword, and dual-wield smaller, quick-hitting weapons, and it was fun. It was a challenge. The first boss I encountered, I did play entirely on World Tier 2, which was the hardest difficulty available that we had in the beta, so enemies did more damage, they took more damage, better loot drops, etc., etc., etc. And it was, a challenge. Some bosses had come across. It'd take me a couple tries to do. It was legitimately a challenge, and it was enjoyable. Then I played the rogue. The rogue was fun as well. I tried out both kind of doing a melee build, then a marksman build, and then kind of like a combination is what I settled on. The rogue seemed great at either single target specializations or AoE specializations. I never quite figured out something to balance both and get use out of both my bow and melee weapons. Kind of same for the barbarian. The barbarian has no ranged options. They can close the gap though pretty quickly and pretty fantastically as well. But trying to figure out a balance of using your bludgeoning attack, your heavy bludgeoning attacks, your slashing and bleed attacks, and then your dual wielding specializations, just it was fun and it was challenging and it was great to kind of theory craft a build, and that was until I tried the sorcerer. The sorcerer is just broken. You don't need to focus anything. It just obliterated packs and bosses near instantly. Stuff that would take me 3 or 4 minutes on as the barbarian would take me half the time on the rogue, and then even half the time, sometimes a 10th the time on the sorcerer than it would take me on the barbarian. Same for the rogue. It was just so unfair, and it was such a huge power fantasy and high I got from playing the sorcerer. I just couldn't really go back and try the other classes anymore. Now, this is something that will absolutely need to be addressed. I don't know if something that comes with the Paragon boards will bring about greater strength in those other 2 classes, but at that point, if you're thinking about that way, that just means the sorcerer is only going to get stronger. This should really be something that they work on over this week before the open beta comes out, and definitely before the launch, because otherwise everyone's just going to be a sorcerer, and there's really not a reason you shouldn't be a sorcerer. Other than this terrible balancing, the gameplay's a blast. It's a Diablo ARPG. You're going to get what you're going to get. You click to move, or you move with your joystick, you have your skills to attack, you clear out mobs of enemies, you have probably some of the best boss fights and dungeon boss fights that you've ever had in a Diablo series available. It's a blast. It's an isometric ARPG. This is the Diablo gameplay we all know and love. Just definitely not good balancing. Overall, Diablo 4, at least the beta, did seem a great return to the adored franchise by millions. This was a limited beta. The first act and its area of Fractured Peaks and a max level of 25 was all that's available, as well as a single world boss and all those dungeons in that area. So we did not get access to the Baragon board. We won't have that in the next beta either. That is being kept secret for the full release. Though next weekend we will also get the other two classes, the Necromancer and Druid, available to try out, and that's what I will be trying at that time. So really, aside from the balancing issues, it was definitely a blast to jump into an actual new Diablo ARPG rather than bounce around between stuff like Last Epoch or Path of Exile, which ultimately, Diablo 4 seems like a great balance between the simplicity of what Diablo 3 was and the complexity of what Path of Exile offers, and it's going to be a great, more casual niche option than any of the other ARPGs out there or disastrous ARPGs out there that are out there, like Diablo Immortal, which is a complete disaster, or Torchlight Infinite, which is a complete disaster. This seems like it'll settle into a nice area, and that doesn't mean it's not going to be complex later on, because you will have your legendary items, you will have your builds, you'll have the complex Paragon boards. So who knows? We don't have an idea of what the end game will be until the game launches, so who knows the replayability of it, which will always be a concern with a game like this. So we'll just have to wait and find out. Though, like I said, overall, my experience with the Diablo 4 early access beta was fantastic and definitely worth checking out this coming weekend for the open beta.